Hey everyone, with BM getting some updates in 9.0.5, I thought I'd redo my guide, so hopefully some of this information is useful for you, and some of it wasn't even covered in the last video, so hopefully it will be useful for someone. First of all, I've seen a few comments on the Discord in regard to pets you should use. There are 3 different pet families. This is a PvE guide, so you basically care about ferocity and tenacity. If you are in a Mythic Plus group without Bloodlust, or if you're in a guild where there is no Mage or Shaman, you take a Frosty pet. Any Frosty pet doesn't really matter, you just want it purely for the Bloodlust buff. So you can see we have the Primal Rage buff, you cast this and it's basically a mini Bloodlust. You also get some Leech, which I see talked about a bit, but I'm going to cover that next anyway. The other kind of pet you have is a Tenacity pet. Now, pet families do the same damage regardless. A Tenacity pet will do the same damage as a Cunning pet or a Frosty pet. So the only difference is the actual signature ability. For a Tenacity pet, it's actually a damage reduction ability. It's called Survival of the Fittest, and it's basically a DR. Now I've tamed Elegon, and that also has Spirit Mend. So Spirit Mend is quite useful. It will do less healing than the Leech, but it's nice. I've just tied it into a macro alongside your other healing spell, and therefore in a pinch it will cast Spirit Mend on you, and you'll also cast your Exhilaration. So it's a nice instant heal, as well as the damage reduction. In Castle Nathria and most raids, and even Mythic Plus, you are going to see spikes of damage. A lot of the time your healer will be fine just healing passive over time effects. It is those initial hits, those big hits that you really want some mitigation for, and therefore I'd always advise taking a Tenacity pet if you already have a Bloodlust over a Frosty pet. That's the first tip, first thing I want to go over. Next thing is your stat weights. You realistically want your haste as your highest stat. After that, your crit, then your verse, and your mastery. Thing is, mastery scale is incredibly high, so I've only got 327 mastery, but it gives you 33% mastery. Whereas for haste, I've got over double. I've got 736, gives you about 22% haste. With bloodletting, the rotation field's fine. Critical strike will increase your wild call procs. It also goes very well with the Rylakkstalkers legendary. Try and keep it as high as possible. The only enchants that you're really going to swap around is if your haste gets too high and your crit's too low, you'll swap around haste for crit enchants, and you might swap the infragreen sight for the optical target in beginner, so it swaps it from being a haste proc to a crit proc. That's the basics of BM Hunter that I kind of want to go over. Now let's jump into the rotation. Your rotation may slightly change throughout Castle Nathria. We now have some variety in our talents, which is nice. These are the main talents you'll be running: Animal Companion, Scent of Blood, Natural Mending, Thrill of the Hunt, Post Haste, Stomp, and Aspect of the Beast. Feel free to change around Post Haste for Born to be Wild, or if you're running Mythic Plus, Binding Shot can be really useful. Similarly, you can drop Natural Mending for something like Trailblazer for world quests and general playing around. The main changes that come in Castle Nathria is in our tier 50 row, or our level 50 row. Aspect of the Beast is standard, it's passive, it's just increased damage, it's really nice. However, as we enter bosses that require certain push timings or certain burst phases, you can swap for Bloodshed. This is really useful for Sludge Fist, and you can use Killer Cobra depending what legendary you're using. It's better for some than with others. For the basics, very basics, I'd advise running this talent row, and this is what our rotation looks like. Your building blocks of BM Hunter is Barbed Shot. I cast Barbed Shot, you gain focus. With the Thrill of the Hunt talent, you gain critical strike chance. And on top of this, for every time you cast it, your pet will gain a stacking 30% attack speed buff. So I'm currently at 2 stacks, I get it a third stack, it went from 60 to 90% attack speed. Your goal is to keep this at 3 stacks consistently, never dropping it. Every time you drop it, your pet will lose on average 45% attack speed, you'll lose 4.5% crit chance, and you will lose thousands of damage purely from dropping it once. This is assuming you are able to get it back up again in an adequate amount of time. So our building blocks is you cast Barbed Shot, you wait for as long as possible to cast your new one. The longer you wait, the longer you're allowing the second charge to recharge. You want it to at least gain a minimum of 2 to 3 seconds, so there is no chance of you dropping your debuff. So this is going lower and lower and lower. I've regained a charge. I'm about to get to 1 second. Cast it. There are multiple weak auras. There's a weak aura by Azortharian, which is quite useful, or you can use this UI, which is Luxthor's Hunter UI, and it gives you a nice show of how long does it have left. Every time you get aspect of the wild call or something, name along those lines, every time you get a free barb shot, you can pump it immediately without worrying about am I going to drop my stacks. So as you can see, I've kept it at 3 stacks. I've had a few procs here and there. It's easy enough with Bloodletting as your potency conduit and the levels of haste that I'm at. If you're at lower levels of haste, you might want to start thinking, how can I get my haste higher? Do I want to change enchants, etc.? This rotation is made even easier with Scent of Blood. Every time you cast Bestial Wrath, you gain 2 charges of Barbed Shot. On top of this, every time you cast Barbed Shot, you reduce the cooldown of Bestial Wrath by 12 seconds. So this is what your opener may look like, only caring about Barbed Shot. Barbed Shot, Barbed Shot, Bestial Wrath, Barbed Shot. I'm at my 3 stacks, I already have a whole charge, and I'm waiting for the next one to get as high as possible without me dropping the buff. There we go. I've already got a charge back. So I've kept my 3 stacks, I'm keeping my focus, I'm keeping my crit, and it's just plain sailing from here. Every time I cast a barbed shot, I reduce this cooldown by 12. So you can see after this one, it's going to go from 30 to 18, 17, and as soon as I cast one more, I'm basically back to full cooldown. So I'm back to my Bestial Wrath, I cast one, and this is my barbed shot. This will just become natural for you. As you get more haste, it becomes even easier. It might become so easy that you can drop Bloodletting for Spiritual Attunement or one with the pack as we get later on in the expansion. This is your building blocks of what you want to play with BM Hunter. So we just play around with this. You can see at my next barbed shot, it's going to go from 30 to 17 again. I got 1 proc, so I can actually cast straight away, and as soon as I do, I'm back to Bestial Wrath. That is our building blocks of BM Hunter. Now, what do you do outside of this? Well, you cast Kill Command as often as you can, and you cast Cobra Shots in between the kill commands. I would advise never casting more than 2 Cobra Shots, because you'll go dry and focus and you simply won't have the GCDs. So what would our kind of opener look like? Well, we go Barbed Shot, Bestial Wrath, Barbed Shot, Kill Command. There we go. Cast some Cobra Shots, Kill Command again. Lovely. Barbed Shot was falling off, we cast it again. This is all we're realistically doing. So you can see I'm already dry and focus. If I was trying to spam 3-4 Cobra Shots, it would get very dry very quickly, which doesn't help us at all. So you can see we're getting close to dropping the buff. There we go. And you can see in one more Barbed Shot, I'm basically back to my Bestial Wrath cooldown. As soon as I pop it, there we go. Done. And I'm back to my 2 stacks. I got a proc. This becomes incredibly easy, and it's now where we get to actually enjoy the perks of BM Hunter, which is we can do all of this damage while moving. We don't particularly have to care about anything really. It's why we get chosen for a lot of mechanics, is because we can do this entire rotation without a worry in the world. We can just run around, we can do what we like, and we can do as much damage as possible. Now you can see Bestial Wrath's back up. This is our basic rotation. I'm going to show you what our rotation looks like with our cooldowns on top. First of all, let's talk about what our cooldowns are. You have Aspect of the Wild. This increases your focus per second, your critical strike chance, and it also reduces the GCD slightly. And you have Wild Spirits. Wild Spirits, you place it on the ground. Every time you do a direct damaging ability, it will cool down a Wild Spirit to do damage. This works incredibly well in AoE, but is also a great single target choice. So how do we use these cooldowns? On pull, just before the boss is about to pull it, about half a second left on the pull timer, cast Aspect of the Wild. As soon as this is done, if the boss is not moving, if it's staying stationary, you can drop Wild Spirits where the boss is. If the boss is moving, I advise pumping your 2 barbed shots and then your Wild Spirits. So in this case, this target dummy is obviously staying still, but let's imagine it has to move a short distance. What would our rotation look like? We're going to go Aspect of the Wild, barbed shot, Wild Spirits, Bestial Wrath, Barbed Shot, and then we go about our usual Kill Command Cobra Shot rotation. So let's go Aspect of the Wild, Barbed Shot, Wild Spirits, Bestial Wrath, Barbed Shot, Kill Command, and now we do our Cobra Shots. As you can see, we're starting to get very high on focus purely because of the pull timer. If you are using Bloodlust on pull for whatever boss you're doing, you can actually use a 3rd Cobra Shot in between those two kill commands at the very start, because focus is not an issue for you. You've basically pumped 3 barb shots back to back, which is increasing your focus generation very quickly. As you can see, we're just doing our usual rotation. We're back to Bestial Wrath already, which gives us an extra barb shot, which means we've got some extra focus. This is our usual rotation. I'm Blood Elf. If you're an Orc, obviously pump your racial into it side of it. If you're Blood Elf, I advise trying to keep your Arcane Torrent or whatever passive you've got for phases where you need the extra focus. This is how our rotation looks. It's simple enough to use, and I hope after some time you get more used to it. It's a fine thing to do, and it's obviously quite easy to do, to be truthfully honest. We have the ability to run around, we can do mechanics. Your pets can also damage things while you're out of range. So if you're thinking of Mythic Artificer, if you're doing seeds, your pet will be dealing damage while you're away. So if you manage to get that third proc or the third stack, you don't let it drop, they'll be doing near enough their full damage from white hits while you're not there, which is incredibly useful to have. This is our rotation. As the cooldowns come back up, providing your guild isn't saving for a burst phase, you can just use them again straight on cooldown. This is with an assumption of no specific legendary in mind. So let's talk about the legendaries and how their buffs in 9.0.5 have made some changes. From a purely sim point of view, Soulforge Embers still does best single target damage and best AoE damage. It does a lot of raw damage, however, it is not affected by mastery at all, which with current Castle Nathria gear, as I've shown you, your mastery can get quite high. This does not impact Soulforge at all, whereas it actually dips into Rylakkstalkers really nicely, which is why we see so many of the top players running with Rylakkstalkers in Mythic Castle Nathria. However, if you like Soulforge Embers or you want to practice with Soulforge Embers for Mythic Plus, this is how your rotation with Soulforge Embers will look. The reason Soulforge Embers gets such a negative rep is because it doesn't interact with wild spirits and it's 2 semi-mouse over macros. You can blend this into 1 mouse over macro, like I'm showing on screen, which is your cast sequence at your cursor, reset in combat of Tar Trap and Flare. So this is bound to my 8 key, so I press 8, it throws the Tar Trap, it then explodes, I press 8 again, and that is my Flare. This will deal damage to whatever targets are inside the Flare, or inside the Tar Trap and inside of the Flare sort of reticule, up to 5 targets, and it does a sizable amount of damage. In Mythic Plus, this is a ridiculous amount of damage. The issue is you're forcing yourself to use extra GCDs on things that aren't Barb Shot and aren't kill commands, and therefore your chance of actually dropping your Barb Shot buff becomes a lot higher. And as soon as you drop Frenzy, drop Thrill of the Hunt, you lose a lot of damage. However, if you're wanting to use Soulforge Embers, you're wanting to get better with it, here's what your opener should look like with Soulforge Embers. As mentioned, it doesn't interact with Wild Spirits whatsoever, so you actually want to drop Wild Spirits a bit later if you're using Soulforge Embers. So what should you be doing? Similarly, on the pull aspect of the Wild, if the boss has to move, you can actually drop your Tar Trap to where he's going to move before the pull. It lasts for a minute on the ground, and when exploded, it will then last there for 30 seconds. Flare as a cooldown is 20 seconds, so you actually have the ability for the flare to enter the same tar trap twice, which means you drop the tar trap, it explodes, you drop flare 1, you wait 20 seconds, the tar is still there, you drop another flare, and it will do another set of damage. You're using 3 GCDs for 2 flares instead of 4 if you were to wait for the tar trap cooldown again. This is where the efficiency of Soulforge Embers comes in. So what does our rotation look like? I'm going to Aspect of the Wild, I'm going to throw my Tar Trap, I'm going to cast Barb Shot, while the boss could be moving at this point or whatever it's doing. As soon as the boss has come to a stop, wherever that is, and the Tar Trap has exploded, we cast our Flare. Once that flare is popped, you want to go for your Bestial Wrath, Wild Spirits, then your third Barb Shot charge, and then your Kill Command and Cobra Shot usual rotation. So it'll look something like this. Aspect the Wild, throw Tar Trap, Barb Shot, Flare, Bestial Wrath, Wild Spirits, third stack, Kill Command, Cobra Shots. And this is the rotation with Soulforge. As you can see, it's added quite a few steps, not all in the most fun. In some bosses, such as Mythic Council, there are some things which make the actual obstruction of the room a bit of a pain in the bum. Our flares come back off cooldowns. This is why I advise having a separate cast on mouse flare button. And you can see I'm back to my Bestial Wrath. So this is doing a good amount of damage. Now my flare has about a 10-second cooldown left. As soon as this has happened, I can actually start to think I'm going to drop my next tar. So I'm going to drop my next tar, it's going to fly over, it's now exploded. My flare's up, let's cast a flare again. I've managed to do this without dropping my barb shot at all, but again, I'm not dealing with any mechanics here. If I'm dealing with seeds on Artificer, or I'm dealing with CCing things in whatever raid encounter you're doing, or in whatever Mythic Plus you're doing, you're going to start to see some drops in performance, or just unlucky play. But as you can see, I've dropped 2 tar traps, I've got 4 flares inside of it, and I've managed to keep my barb shot rotation up. This is how your Soulforge Embers is going to look. Again, my flare is coming to less than a 10-second cooldown, which means I can realistically drop my tar, it's going to explode, my flare is going to come up, I want to drop it, there we go, we're going to wait, I'm going to do my usual rotation, I've got another Bestial Wrath, I can go back to my similar things of what I'm doing, my flare comes up in another 10 seconds, my tar will still be there, and from this we'll have had 3 tar traps with 6 flares going off inside of it. So it's an interesting playstyle. As soon as you're doing bosses with complex mechanics, I would advise going for one of the other legendaries, which I'll cover in the next segment. But this is your Soulforge Embers rotation. I hope it's been useful for those of you who still enjoy it. Now let's talk about the 2 legendaries that got buffed this patch, Rylakkstalkers and Dire Command. Rylakkstalkers still has some optimizations. It is a lot easier to set it and forget it, and you will pass fine with it. If you are able to keep your Frenzy and Thrill of the Hunt at your 3 stacks, you're able to weave in some good Bestial Wrath windows, you're going to do fine damage. The optimizations come from when I cast Bestial Wrath, my pet damage is what's being increased, or my pet crit damage. So you want to be getting as many kill commands as possible off during that window. Now what does this mean? Well, your cooldowns are reduced on kill command every time you cast Cobra Shot. So as soon as you enter Bestial Wrath, you want to be kill commanding and have enough focus to Cobra Shot, kill command. Cobra Shot, kill command. This is very easy on the pull, especially if you've got Bloodlust, because you have got the excess focus from your 3 basically back-to-back barbed shots. But for later on in the fight, I advise maybe pooling some resources or not casting kill command directly before you're going to get a Bestial Wrath timer. But to show you the general rotation for Rylakkstalkers, After the Wild, barbed shot, Wild Spirits, Bestial Wrath, barbed shot, kill command. So I've got 1 kill command off. I'm going to use 3 Cobra shots just to get it back as soon as possible. I'm going to use a Cobra shot. There's my 2nd kill command. Can I get a 3rd? Yes, I did. So I got my 3rd off. This is a non-sim perfect Bestial Wrath window, but with Bloodlust up, you're likely to be able to get that 4 uses of kill command up. And as you can see, we're coming back to it. I'm actually going to save this kill command. I'm going to use my barbed shot, Bestial Wrath, kill command immediately. Now I've got enough focus to pump some Cobra shots. So there's my 2nd kill command. Can I get a 3rd off? I definitely can get a 3rd off. Am I likely to get a 4th? Probably not. Maybe if I'm lucky. No, just outside the window. So there are still optimizations to be made. This obviously becomes a lot easier depending what kind of talent you're using. And it's now why we actually see a rise on our level 50 talent of Killer Cobra. This will make the rotation a bit more focus hungry, but it makes that ability to get those kill commands off inside of that Bestial Wrath window so much easier, because instead of having to cast 2 to 3 Cobra shots, you cast 1. Now you lose the passive 30% damage, but for those Bestial Wrath windows which are empowered by Rylakkstalkers, Killer Cobra is it's a fine talent. It does a lot of damage, especially if you've got those burst phases with your Bestial Wrath that you're working around. This is Rylakkstalkers. I hope it's useful. Let's have a quick talk about Dire Command. So what does Dire Command do? Kill Command has a 30% chance to also summon a Dire Beast to attack your target. So let's see if I can proc this. There we go, and it cast a Dire Beast already on my first proc. So that 30% chance, summon a Dire Beast, Look what it's attacking for, 57. It attacks for 57. If we look at the damage, we have my melee from my beast. Its normal hit was 56. Its average was 56. This is not a direct damage legendary. It is doing kind of very low damage. If I didn't call off my other pets deal damage, this would be bottom of the pack by miles. You can see my kind of one kill command out damaged it massively. So why are you actually taking this legendary? Well, if I use it again, and I try and actually get the proc, you'll see why you use it. So I didn't get the Dire Beast again. You can see sometimes RNG is with you, sometimes it's not. There we go. I've got my proc. Haste is increased by 5%. This is why you're using the legendary. It increases your haste by a base of 5%. As your haste gets higher, the diminishing returns on haste obviously gets worse. However, this is a 5% haste buff. This is worth 5% at this part of the expansion or later on in the expansion. And haste is one of our main stats. It gives us extra focus regen, obviously reduces the cooldown of your barb shot slightly, and it just has a ton of great benefits. Now this has 0 impact in AoE. As you can see, the damage of it is pitiful. It does 57 average. This is not attacking anything. It doesn't actually proc Beast Cleave. There's nothing from it at all, which is for AoE. So if you're in a pure single target encounter, it can be useful purely for that 5% haste. Think Shriekwing, think maybe Artificer, Hungering Destroyer. However, for a lot of these fights, you're sometimes, or a lot of the time, you're better off taking Rylakkstalkers. There's one fight which is still dominated by Soulforge Embers, and that's Huntsman, purely because it's nearly always stacked AoE. It's a really good fight for it. I can't argue against it. It does just feel a bit kind of weird to play. So if you do not like Soulforge Embers, I advise your rotation throughout Castle Nathria can be full Rylak. If you've got one legendary, the Soul Ash for one legendary, let's say you're playing MM main or survival in PvP, you have a Soul Ash for one, go Rylakkstalkers. Rylakkstalkers is not a bad legendary for any of these fights, and it becomes I wouldn't say easier to play, but it's a lot easier than using Soulforge Embers with the weird mouse over macros. There are still optimizations if you want to get to those 95+% passes, but it becomes a lot nicer to work out, micromanage, and get used to if you just run Rylak for everything. As a last little bit, let's talk about your conduits and what you should be running at the moment. So at the moment, I run Bloodletting. Bloodletting feels nice for me. There is an argument to be made for using Spiritual Attunement or Spirit Attunement, which is your increase on Wild Spirits damage. It is a damage increase, there's no doubt about it. However, being able to consistently pump out more barbed shots, make sure you're not ever dropping your Thrill of the Hunt and Frenzy buff, and just the damage and focus that kind of barbed shots bring, I personally just run Bloodletting. At the moment, the best damaging ability is Nia's Tools of Burrs, and therefore we only get one potency conduit. Now you can choose whatever defensive ones you like. For bosses at the moment, such as Council, I've decided to run Exhilaration and Harmony of the Tortolan as my defensive conduits, and I'm currently using the Reversal of Fortune. So if I happen to interrupt a cast, which I'm on rotation for in Council, I gain extra focus. It's little optimizations here and there, but this is what I'm currently running. I advise you do the same. If you are wanting to try out Spirit Treatment, feel free to. As you get to higher amounts of haste, if you're still using the infragreen reflex sight, you might not need the actual reduction of 1 second by barb shot, and you can take the extra 3 seconds of wild spirits, as well as the increased damage from it from wild spirits. It's useful, it does good damage. I'm just deciding to use Bloodletting because it seems a tad more consistent for me. It makes the rotation feel a bit nicer, and for things such as dropping off seeds and Artificer, that 1 less second on barb shot meant I never dropped my frenzy buff, which when doing seeds is very easy to do. This has been my guide. I look forward to hearing from more of you on Discord, and I wish you all the best playing BM. Have a good day, everyone.